This is John Rubino from DollarCollapse.com, and you're listening to Run to Gold.
Welcome back to episode 52 of the RunToGold.com podcast. This will be a tie-in with How to Vanish, where we've been talking about Hawala banking and financial privacy.
Welcome back to the How to Vanish podcast. This is Trace.
And this is Bill.
And today we're going to be talking about Hawala banking. So, Bill, what is Hawala banking?
Well, Hawala is the official term for really what is an informal system of banking. It kind of originated, and most of what Hawala banking is simply money transfers across borders, across great distances, where you contact someone who just happens to know someone in another city so that they can send money to somebody in that city. The transactions usually take place. No money actually travels the distance. They just send a message to the Hawaladar, who is kind of the broker of the transaction, or there could be two Hawaladars in a transaction. But they send a message to the other recipient of money to go to this other Hawaladar to go pick up whatever amount was agreed upon. And this can happen several times before the two Hawaladars then settle any outstanding difference between the two.
So it seems like it's extremely informal then, as far as records that are being kept or regulation. Do we have Hawaladar insurance, kind of like we have FDIC insurance, or is this pretty much something that just rides on social capital in the sense of the relationships that exist and the trust that brings?
Right. It's a very, very old system. It's thousands of years old, much older than kind of our Western style of banking. And so this has been going on for thousands of years. And what happens is these Hawaladars, who generally engage in this kind of in these transactions, they develop reputations, and they're well known in their communities. And they know the other Hawaladars in other cities and other countries really well. So all the transactions take place on this very informal, I know you, so I'm going to do this with you, kind of system, kind of environment. And compared to just about any other kind of banking system, it has the lowest rate of default. It has, there's basically no legal protection that they need to buy, no insurance that they need to buy, because defaults simply don't happen. If it were to happen, the reputation that these Hawaladars have built up over generations would be out the window, and these people's lives would be ruined. So the informality of it really creates an extremely secure system.
So while it may appear informal to someone like you or I that's trained in the law, and we want assets to secure and we want things on the table that we can see, in reality it's actually probably a lot more secure, because we all know the story of someone who gets a judgment and the judgment's only worth the paper that it's written on, because you can't get any of the assets. And so in these cases, even though you can't necessarily see everything in the system, if you're an outsider looking in, if you're actually inside the system, it's very transparent, because you know Uncle Jim, and Uncle Jim's the Hawaladar, and you trust Uncle Jim, and so and Uncle Jim trusts you, and so you're able to enter into the transactions and get things done. And that seems to be how it works, if I'm understanding correctly.
Right. The cultures that Hawala banking comes out of, and Hawala is just one term. It's known by different names in different regions of the world. Hawala is the Islamic name that comes out of the Islamic cultures. But these cultures are very strong. They're almost tribal feeling, a lot of them. And so for them, the relationship is much, much stronger than we would think of in the West with business relationships or even family relationships. The relationships in these cultures where Hawala banking is practiced is extremely, extremely important.
Now, I've noticed this with myself. For example, I use Facebook or other websites, other of these social networking websites where you're able to kind of build a reputation and you have your friends in there. And so whenever I need something and I'm in a strange city or whatnot, I'm usually able to find someone who knows someone in that city, and I'm able to figure out the good places to eat or the good local places to visit. And I suppose that this Hawala banking would just be another one of those services that I could tap into, that social network of friends that I have whenever I'm in one of these places, right?
It's interesting because I think Hawala banking really grows out of a need for it. And so as Hawala has had expanded into other areas of the world, it really only expanded into areas where there was a need for people like immigrant workers to remit money back home to their families. So it really hasn't grown out of those areas or those need centers very much, except for small one-time kind of transactions, but not the overall system that the Hawala has in these other areas, in these other locations.
And for the most part, we haven't really needed this type of a system as Westerners, but with the looming threat of currency controls, and I know that I've written quite extensively on currency controls, we might see this type of a need arise for us Westerners in the not-too-distant future, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just the efficiency of Hawala and the low default rate, and the anonymity. There's sometimes the Hawala Dars will keep records, but really that's up to them. And the vast majority keep no records of the individual transactions. They only keep a tally of the accounts between other Hawala Dars, which they settle later on. So all of these things are incredibly beneficial to everyone. The Western-style banking system, as far as remitting money or having a broker to be the middleman in some kind of transaction, are much less efficient. There's a much higher default rate, and obviously, bank secrecy laws and things like that, which are kind of an oxymoron. They don't allow for much bank secrecy. All create kind of this driver, this push towards a Hawala system in the West. And so I think certainly currency controls are probably going to be the tipping point. They are probably going to be what tips the scales to where we see Hawala Dars in our own neighborhoods or people that we know engaging in these kinds of transactions.
Now that's very interesting. Now, I've also received quite a few comments. I know you have also, or at least questions. For example, I got one comment. It asked, "Can I get some contact information for a Hawala Dar?" And it made me chuckle because it just shows how unacquainted we are in the Western field with this type of banking process. And I know you also had a story about one of our readers trying to find the contact information for a Hawala Dar there in Thailand. So could you tell me a little bit about the process of trying to find one of these Hawala Dars?
Well, this concept of getting in touch with Hawala Dars, it's difficult because of what I was talking about, how it's grown out of this cultural base and this need base in these unique cultures. And so if you're not an insider in the culture, it's difficult to break in. And on top of that, a lot of countries have been passing laws. Sometimes they're just not laws, but they are suggestions about, we'd like you to register if you're a Hawala Dar, or something like that. But those kinds of activities make Hawala Dars and Hawala banking go a little bit underground. So, every area of the world is different. But Hawala Dars are kind of scaling back their advertising. They still might advertise in a newspaper in the community, for example, Los Angeles, California, has a lot of different ethnicities in that community. There's a paper in Farsi, and there's a paper in Hindi, and there's a paper in all kinds of different languages. Hawala might be advertising in those kinds of papers, but for the most part, you can't just look one up. You have to know one. You have to kind of be in the community. So it creates for some real difficulties, especially for my friend in Thailand, who I was corresponding with, trying to figure out how he can get in touch with a Hawala Dar. And we came up with a few ideas, a few things that he could try. But the cultural barriers there, and probably in a lot of other places, are pretty high.
Now, what exactly did he have? What exactly is he then trying to do to find a Hawala Dar there in Thailand?
Just about everything I could think of. He posted ads on Craigslist looking for someone who engages in Hawala banking transactions. He did get some feedback that it is going on in his area, but no one would tell him where or how to contact them or anything. And apparently, in that area of the world where he's living, it's very taboo for someone of his culture and background to be seen in the kind of neighborhoods or with the kind of people that would be engaging in Hawala banking. So he looked on Craigslist for people advertising it and all these kinds of things and really couldn't find much. But I think that there is going to be a possibility that he will be able to get in touch with those kind of communities. What he suggested was he is going to go and talk to maybe some bellhops or some taxi drivers who can act as a liaison between the two cultures, who move in and out of those two cultures pretty seamlessly. And he maybe might hire them as private couriers to send messages back and forth. So we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping he's going to tell me how his search goes, because that may be a good model for people around the world to follow if they can't find a Hawala Dar through the regular means of searching for business services.
Exactly. It kind of reminds me, I've got a couple friends, multimillionaire real estate investors that live there in Thailand. One's Dutch, the other's Belgian, and they both happen to marry Thai women. And so I bet it would be a little bit easier for them to get in contact with Hawala Dar because of their wives who are both Thai and, of course, integrated into that society and whatnot. And that seems to be how it works. You have to. It's not necessarily what you know, but it's who you know in this type of a system. And so it's going to be very interesting to see Westerners adopt this type of activity as further restrictions on capital flows seem to be coming down the line.
Right.
Let's see.
It's just the nature of the transaction. There are probably the majority of Hawala Dars don't consider themselves Hawala Dars and probably don't even know that term. They just know that there's a need for this transaction to take place, and they offer their services to the person that might need it that one time. Maybe they do it once or twice or three times in their entire life. But that just makes it harder to find them if you're not if you don't know one. But I think as Westerners start to understand how it works and realize the great potential that there is in that kind of banking system, then we'll kind of see maybe an integration of both styles, the close relationship that's needed, and also maybe a little bit more open. I don't know if that is going to be destructive to the anonymity or the integrity of the system, but it will be very interesting to see how it plays out.
Yes, it will be. And I know with myself, for example, my sister, she needed something for her one of her children, and we actually I had her give my mother the money, and I had what she needed for her child. So I then sent it to my sister, and so it appears that my mom actually acted as a hawala dar just within our familial transactions. So I do think most people have probably engaged in this type of a system in their life at least once, probably many times, and it'll probably continue to grow. And there are so many applications. For example, offshore bank accounts for U.S. citizens do need to be reported under the TD90F. However, real estate that's held outside of the country generally is not reportable. And so someone could have real estate held in some foreign country, and then they would have someone who was able to collect the rent, and then they could use a hawala dar and then get the money remitted to them here in the States without it going through any type of international wire transfers or things like that would have high costs. Because I think some international wire transfers cost up to $100, where they could use a hawala dar and maybe have it cost $5. So there are all types of these great advantages to using the system that are a lot cheaper than something that doesn't have as much efficiency to it.
Oh,
let's see. Are there?
Yeah, and efficiency is just the tip of the iceberg with benefit.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Makes it kind of fun. Let's see, is there anything else? I know that we're going to be doing quite a bit more explanation on hawala banking in future articles and future podcasts, both on How to Vanish and on Run to Gold, because of the intertwining nature of the financial privacy and the economics of it, particularly with regards to currency controls. But with this introductory podcast, are there any other issues that we'd like to discuss or talk about?
I don't think so. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but I think for now, as an introduction, that's probably pretty good, and I'm sure people will let us know if there's anything specific that they want to know the next time we talk about it.
Yes, that's a great invitation. On both of the sites, we have forums where people can enter their questions, and we get sent that email, and so then we know exactly what type of questions our readers are asking or are after, and what types of things they want to learn. And they can also give us some suggestions, like this fellow that's he's wandering around Thailand trying to find a hawala dar, and so he can give good, helpful suggestions on what has worked and what hasn't. So we'd appreciate any reader comments or submissions on the forums on either of the sites with regards to this topic. Well, thanks, Bill. This has been great.
Yeah, it's been good.
Hi, this is Jim Willey from the Hat Trick Letter, found on www.goldenjackass.com, and you are listening to Run to Gold.